Quite often, writers tell me that they struggle to write the action of their fight scenes. They wonder how much to write, when to put in breaks, and how to describe / block the movements when they aren't even really familiar with the fighting style. That is what we are going over today, those three things. This is the FightWrite podcast. I am Carla Hoke. Guys, if you're new to the podcast, check out my blog at FightWrite, FightWrite.net, as well as my book, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes. If you would like to take a FightWrite class, head over to Writers Digest University and search Carla Hoke, CarlaHoch. One that I know is up right now, 3 things you should consider before writing your fight scene, and hopefully there'll be more added to the library soon. The code for that, if you use FIGHT10, FIGHT10, you'll get $10 off. Cha-ching! All right, as I said, today we're going to talk about how much to write in your fight scene, when to put in the breaks, and how to describe block the movements. First, how much of the action should you write? Well, the good news is not nearly as much as you think. I often hear folks recap fights they've seen. And even if it's a fighting style they are very familiar with and whoever they're talking to is familiar with, they don't describe every single action. They only highlight the pivotal movements. Sports reporters do exactly the same thing. Here, you know what? I've got an example from a fight. Okay, this is a recap of the final round, the Thrilla in Manila. Let me tell you a little bit about that first. It is one of the greatest boxing matches of all time. If you are a fan of boxing and haven't seen it, watch it. Go to YouTube, Thrilla, Thrilla in Manila. What the sports reporter has written about here is the third and final bout between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier for the heavyweight title, and it was a slug fest. Honestly, it went on too long. Frazier's coach stopped the fight before the final 15th round. Modern matches are 12. In all, there were over 500 punches thrown. That's about 12 per minute, which is a heck of a lot for a heavyweight bout. Okay, I'm going to read the recap of the final pivotal moments. Okay, here's what the reporter wrote. Finally, in the 10th round, Frazier began to slow down and tire, and Ali slowly turned the tide. In the 11th round, he used his speed to dance more and to unload a series of fast combinations on Frazier, which severely disfigured his face by the end of the round, swelling Frazier's eyes to the point that nothing but a tiny slit remained. Throughout the 12th round, Ali continued to turn the momentum, increasingly overwhelming Frazier, and using the fact that Frazier could no longer see his right hand coming to hit Frazier with one hard right after another. About a minute into the 13th round, Ali landed another blistering combination on Frazier, sending the injured fighter's mouthpiece flying into the crowd. Okay, this recap is on a site with an audience who quite likely knows boxing. I think I got it off of BoxRec, BoxRec.com. It stands to reason that all manner of technical lingo could be used, and the readers would be able to follow any movement in detail. But the writer of the article didn't write each movement. You notice how many times he used the word combination. Combination means more than one punch. How many more than one punch? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Instead, the writer gave us an overview with the most important details. We know Ali's tactics, and we know the effect they had on Frazier, and one dramatic moment when Frazier's mouthpiece flew out of his mouth. You do not need to write every single detail of the action, every step, every stab, every strike. It's not necessarily. It's probably not what most readers want. Yeah, you may have a few readers who want more detail, and that's great. They are so invested in your work that they want more details. And yes, you may have a scant few who put down your book because you did not specify what punches went to a combo. But you're far more likely, in my opinion, to lose readers by making a fight scene go on too long. Your fight scenes are not your story. They support it. Some of my favorite fight scenes are from the book Fight Club. Go figure. Chuck Palahniuk is one of my favorite writers, and I highly suggest his book on writing. It's called Consider This: Moments in My Writing Life After Which Everything Was Different. If I could go to sleep and wake up writing like anybody, it would be Chuck Palahniuk. Here is a bit of one fight scene from a night at the Underground Fight Club. The first fight I get, the guy gets me in a full Nelson and rams my face, rams my cheek, rams the hole in my cheek into the concrete floor until my teeth snap off and plant their jagged roots into my tongue. My second fight, the guy puts a knee between my shoulder blades. Then he pulls both my arms together behind my back and he slams my chest into the concrete floor, my collarbone on one side. I hear it snap. Okay, now a lot took place in those two fights, but Palahniuk, he doesn't recount every single moment and every movement. He tells us just enough to convey the violence and make us wince. You would think that a book entitled Fight Club would just have oodles of details about the fights, but it doesn't, because the fights are not the story. The fights are for the story. They're not the story. So how much of the fight do you need to put in your fight scene? Just enough. Highlight the major movements. Connect your reader with the sensory elements that they can relate to. There are very few people who can relate to bare-knuckle brawls like those in Fight Club. But when Palahniuk writes that the narrator's teeth snap off and plant their jagged roots into his tongue, we all grimace because everybody can relate to that. In the book, I can't remember the movie, but in the book, the narrator is never named. So that's why I said narrator. Okay. Blocking your fight scene. I am a believer in blocking out the fight scene. Go over the actions, start to finish, write it all down, everything and then some. And then go back and highlight those actions. Which ones? I am so glad you asked. Some of my favorite resources for fight scene blocking are actually comic books and graphic novels. When you look at fight scenes in comic books and graphic novels, every single movement is not illustrated. Only the most important moves are drawn into the panels. The panels are the squares in the comic books where the illustrations are, and graphic novels. The most important moves tend to be the large ones. Small movements only get real estate on the page if they are pivotal to the fight. By the way, the difference in a comic book and a graphic novel. A graphic novel is one complete story all at once. A comic book is a story broken into tiny pieces. So think of a graphic novel as a movie and a comic book as a regular episode on TV. Okay, so write all you want in your fight scene. Put 1,000,000 actions in there. It's fine. But then go back and highlight only what would be illustrated in a comic book. How many panels do you get? Let's say 4 panels at most. And then give the reader a break. Step away from the action in some way. You can stay in the scene, just step back from the action. Okay, what about all the actions that you cut out? Well, they can be assumed. I promise. We do that all the time when we write. How many books have you read that told you, okay, this is crude, but it's a real thing. How many books have you read that told you about the character going number 2? Yeah, I said it, taking a deuce. Dropping kids off at the pond. Talking to Mr. Grumpy. Yeah, that's what I said. Look, guys, a bowel movement is a normal function of the human body, and it is darn important. Any character we write that eats will have to have an evacuation of some nature or they will die. But do we write it? Probably not. But what if while they were on the potty, something huge happens to them that changes the story? What if we're writing about Elvis Presley's death? We would have to write the potty scene because, guys, the king died on the throne. That's a real thing. Elvis Presley, God bless him, died on the toilet. In that situation, you might want to write about your character and all their bodily functions. And that's actually a good example on what to block in your fight scene. Elvis Presley dying on the toilet is something you would have to write in a scene about his death. Would you have to tell every gory detail of him trying to expel several pounds of fecal matter? For real, y'all, several pounds of impacted fecal matter. Do you have to write all that? No, you don't. Your reader knows about BMs. And I'm willing to bet they know about constipation. You don't have to write every single grunt of Elvis Presley. You only have to write the big movements. He's there, he's straining, he's sweating. He falls off the toilet. God bless him. He did. He fell off the toilet. Give more attention to the sensory experience of the fight scene. If it's first person, the pain, obviously, as well as the effort, the sweating, the exhaustion, the fear. Okay, if it's third person, describe their red face, veins, Elvis Presley, okay? Writing that third person. If you're writing the Elvis Presley thing first person, tell about the horrible pain his gut is in and how he's straining and all that. If it's third person, describe his red face, veins bulging on his forehead, the sound of him hitting the floor, his death rattle, as his reign comes to an end, okay? So that is blocking your fight scene. Go ahead, write all you want, but then go back and only highlight the major movements or what you would see in a comic book panel. Now, where to put in the breaks. Okay, when you're writing a fight scene, it can be just plain hard to know where to put breaks in amidst the action. And I think part of why it's so hard is because there is not a concrete formula. It's not easy. We can't Bob Ross it. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Ross, but he is a painter. I watched him as a kid, but I don't know if it was in syndication. I think he was late 70s, early 80s. And he had a show that taught people how to paint. And you would watch him. And he would paint happy little trees and, a happy little lake. Everything was very happy. And he made it look so... Watching Bob Ross and hearing him talk about the process of what he's doing right in front of your face, he makes it sound so easy. Well, I have it on good authority by my artist friend, Daniel McFarlane. Look him up, by the way. McFarlane is spelled MacFarlane. Daniel McFarlane. We did knife training together. He assured me that Bob Ross is a genius with a painting knife, and good luck emulating him. But here's the thing. Picasso didn't paint like Bob Ross. Neither did Frida Kahlo, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Georgia O'Keeffe, Banksy, Jim Carrey. The comedian Jim Carrey. He's amazing. Look up his work. There's more than one way to paint a happy little tree. And there's more than one way to paint a happy little fight scene too. Okay, all that said, it does help to have some type of guide to get you moving in the right direction. So I'm going to read 3 examples of fight scenes. And we're going to look at listen at how each writer doled out the action. Okay, this is Chuck Palahniuk, Fight Club. Is this the same? I can't remember. I might have gone over this, just read this scene to you guys. Let me see. Yeah, I already read it. Okay, so we saw earlier what Chuck Palahniuk did. Okay, here's fight number 3. Fight number 3. I wake up and it's time for fight number 3. Number 3 seems to know what I need and holds my head in the dark and the smother. There's a sleeper hold that gives you just enough air to stay awake. Number 3 holds my head in the crook of his arm, the way he'd hold a baby or a football in the crook of his arm, and hammers my face with the pounding molar of his clenched fist, until my teeth bite through the inside of my cheek, until the hole in my cheek meets the corner of my mouth, and the two run together into a ragged leer that opens from under my nose to under my ear. Number 3 pounds until his fist is raw, until I'm crying. How everything you ever love will reject you or die. Everything that you ever create will be thrown away. Everything you're proud of will end up as trash. I am Ozymandias, King of Kings. One punch, and my teeth click shut on my tongue. half my tongue drops to the floor and gets kicked away. Oh my gosh. I love Joe Palahniuk so much. Really, do you hear that? He pounds him until he's crying, until how everything you will ever love will reject you and die. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have read every fight scene in that book to the point that I can quote them. And they all have something in common. Palahniuk tends to give a sentence of action, and then he goes hard into the sensory experience. In truth, Palahniuk's fights take a supporting role to the physical outcome of them. I mean, from what I just read, what do you remember? Probably the guy's, half of his tongue drop into the floor. And you'll notice also that Palahniuk varies his sentence length. I love that about him. Sometimes the sentence is one whole paragraph. And then sometimes the sentence is really short and they're choppy and they stand alone. And that kind of forces the pacing of his fight scenes. Oh, if you know Chuck Palahniuk, tell him I love him. Okay, this next excerpt is from a lesser-known writer, a man named J.R.R. Tolkien. Just kidding. This is from The Return of the King, being the third part of The Lord of the Rings. Okay, let me get this pulled up. The orcs, hindered by the mires that lay before the hills, halted and poured their arrows into the defending ranks. But through them there came striding up, roaring like beasts, a great company of trolls out of Gorgoroth, taller and broader than men were, and they were clad in those in only close-fitting mesh of horny scales, or maybe that was their hideous hide. But they bore round bucklers, huge and black, and wielded heavy hammers in their knotted hands. Reckless, they sprang into the pools and waded across, bellowing as they came. Like a storm, they broke upon the line of men of Gondor and beat upon helm and head and arm and shield, as smiths hewing the hot bending iron. At Pippin's side, Bergeron was stunned and overborne, and he fell, and the great troll chief that smote him down bent over him, reaching out a clutching claw, for these fell creatures would bite the throats of those they threw down. Then Pippin stabbed upwards, and through-written blade of Westerness pierced through the hide and went deep into the vitals of the troll, and his black blood came gushing out. He toppled forward and came crashing down like a falling rock, burying those beneath him. Blackness and stench and crushing pain came upon Pippin, and his mind fell away into a great darkness. Okay, we got a totally different experience here. We've got more sentences devoted to action than the sensory experience. What we don't see is a lot of meticulous details happening. This is a mass siege, and Tolkien writes it as one might see it from above the fray rather than within it. And rather than writing too much about the whole siege, Tolkien focuses on the action of two characters. And again, there are a ton of sensory details here. He gives more writing to the description of the fight than the actual moves in it. And I really like that. Okay, this last example is from Ender's Game. I think it's book 1, Ender Quintet. It is book 1, Ender Quintet by Orson Scott Card. Okay, Orson Scott Card's totally different than the other two. Bonzo's tight, hard ribs came against Ender's face, and his hands slapped against his back, trying to grip him. But Ender twisted, and Bonzo's hands slipped. In an instant, Ender was completely turned, yet still inside Bonzo's grasp. The classic move at this movement would to be bring up his heel into Bonzo's crotch, but for that move to be effective required too much accuracy, and Bonzo accepted it. He was already rising onto his toes, thrusting his hip backward to keep Ender from reaching his groin. Without seeing him, Ender knew it would bring his face closer, almost in Ender's hair. So instead of kicking, he lunged upward off the floor, with the powerful lunge of the soldier bounding from the wall, and jammed his head into Bonzo's face. Ender whirled in time to see Bonzo stagger backward, his nose bleeding, gasping from surprise and pain. Ender knew that at this moment he might be able to walk out of the room and end the battle, the way he had escaped from the battle room after drawing blood. But the battle would only be fought again and again, until the will to fight was finished. The only way to end things completely was to hurt Bonzo enough that his fear was stronger than his hate. So Ender leaned back against the wall behind him, then jumped up and pushed off with his arms. His feet landed on Bonzo's belly and chest. Ender spun in the air and landed on his toes and hands. He flipped over, scooted under Bonzo, and this time he kicked upward into Bonzo's crotch. He connected, hard and sure. Well, talk about action-packed. Okay, a lot of movement here, but notice that Card breaks it up. Is it Card or Scott Card? I thought Scott was his middle name. I think it's not like Scott Card, a double last name. It's just Card, right? Anyway, notice that he breaks it up, the action, by going into the minds of the fighters. He'll devote a few sentences to the action, then he'll back away to give the reader a breather. And then he chooses verbs that are descriptive. They do the job of adjectives: slapped, slipped, thrusting, lunge, bounding, jam, stagger. Not only do these words keep the scene moving with action, but they kind of have a sensory impact. I mean, just the sound of those words have a sensory impact. So make the most of the words you choose. Okay, so looking back at these scenes, Palahniuk likes to give a little action, maybe a sentence or two, and then punctuates it hard by diving deep into the physical sensation of the fight. Tolkien puts the reader at the fight scene in the midst of the mayhem as a whole without asking them to keep up with movements of too many individuals. When he does focus on actual fight maneuvers, he gives a long sentence or two, then backs away for more description. Card backs away from the fight after at most 3 sentences, and then goes into the heads of the fighters. So if you're looking for a Bob Ross kind of template for your fight scene, maybe give a couple sentences of action and then back away. In natural conversations, we tend to give breaks from action. Watch any fight scene, in movie, TV, it doesn't matter how realistic, then tell someone about that fight. It is not likely you will bog them down with a million tiny details describing every single move. And at some point in the telling, you will probably describe how a fighter responded or bled or what they said, and that is natural pacing in a conversation. Try to carry that on to your page. Ultimately, you have to make your own way. Write your fight scene the way that only you can write it. It has to be your voice. I asked my jiu-jitsu coach once to help me figure out my thing. Fighters tend to have go-to techniques that they really love and they excel at, and they try to move the fight in that direction. Well, after more than 6 years of jiu-jitsu, I couldn't zero in on what my thing was, and I wanted my coach to tell me what technique I should favor and then make a map for me on how to lead my opponent to that technique. My coach had been a black belt for 20 years, coached around the world, competed on the world level. I figure, hey, if anybody can Bob Ross my game and give me a formula for it, this guy good. But you know what he said? He said I had to figure it out for myself. I needed to keep fighting and sharpening my technique, and my game would come together on its own. Now, that wasn't the answer I wanted then. Honestly, I still don't like that answer, but it's the answer I needed. Had he given me a go-to technique, I might have focused on it to the detriment of all the other techniques that I could be better at. And it's the same for your fight scene. Nobody can give you the perfect formula for writing one. Palahniuk, Tolkien, Card, these are masters of writing, and they all have their own voice. We do see that they tend to all back away from the particulars, of an altercation after just a few sentences. But the manner in which they do that is unique to their writing. And it'll be unique to your writing voice too. So you have to keep writing, you have to keep practicing and sharpening your technique. Your fight writing voice will surface on its own. You got to write like only you can write it. Okay, so let's recap. This is a long one. How much of the action should you write? Not as much as you think. Just recap it. Sum it up in the major movements. Write only as much as you would see in a cartoon panel. And that leads us to blocking. Okay, well, when you're mentally blocking it out in your head, what moves do you include? Again, only the ones that you would include in the fight scene that would be illustrated in a fight scene panel. And that's actually going to help you write it. I really suggest blocking it out in your head first and then zeroing in on the major actions and then writing, because once you have those major movements highlighted, then you know what you should highlight and write it like a sports reporter. As far as where to put the breaks, again, that's just going to be your writing voice. But from what we've seen from three, masters of writing with three very different styles, give it a few sentences and then back away. Give the fight scene some air, give your reader some breathing room. Well, okay. So I hope that sums it up for you. This was a long episode. Was it a long episode? I don't even know how long this has gone. I hope you stuck with me. Okay, and I hope this was helpful for you. Guys, if you ever have any questions, please reach out to me through my contact form on my blog, FightWrite, FightWrite.net. You can reach out to me via IG, Carla, C-A, I don't know how to spell my name, CARLA.C.Hoch, H-O-C-H, or you can hashtag FightWrite and you'll be able to track me down that way. Send me questions, and watch follow me, watch my IG stories, because sometimes I will give open calls for questions, for something I'm going to do on IGTV. Don't forget about the blog, FightWrite.net. Don't forget about my book, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes. You can get it basically anywhere. I think you can even get it at Target at this point, which I'm very thankful for. I don't know if it's in store, but it's definitely online. But it is in bookstores as well. And don't forget about my class with Writer's Digest, Fight 10, Writer's Digest University. Fight 10, F-I-G-H-T, 10 will get you $10 off. Authors, if you would like me to promo your book on the show, contact me through the contact form on FightWrite.net. And that is it. Now, go forth. Write that fight scene. You can do it. Promise. Super promise. Until the next round at the FightWrite podcast, get blood on your pages.